Thank you very much for inviting me back. I've enjoyed the last couple of times I've been here with you. As Rick quite properly said, we're going to be talking a little bit about offshore. I know that as part of your docent work, you're frequently working immediately adjacent to the shoreline. And there are things out there in the bay, coming into Carmel Bay, out of Monterey Bay, that are large mammals. And we're going to talk about that first, and then we'll get into this business about the harbor seals and, more importantly, the sea lions, because there's been quite a bit of controversy about that. With that, hit number one here. This is a fin whale, and fin whales, as brilliantly depicted by Richard Ellis, the late wonderful marine mammal artist, frequently come in adjacent to the outer part of the shoreline. And you may see that small dorsal fin on the back of the animal as it surfaces. There's another whale that's out there with it too, the sei whale, S-E-I, it's a Scandinavian word, pronounced sei, and the little fins on the back of these, the dorsal fins, are fairly inconspicuous, so that all you can probably do is say that's either a fin whale or a sei whale there offshore, unless you want to fudge it and pretend that you know which one it actually is. The next one is humpback whale. Humpbacks are the ones that visit us apparently from Hawaii in large numbers during the summer months and into the fall. They're the ones that do this spectacular jumping out of the water, or breaching effect. And this you can probably see readily from the shoreline, because sometimes they'll come out of the water 6, 10, 12 times in a row for purposes that we don't really know. It's been suggested that they're trying to knock some of the various sea lice and marine mammals that attach themselves to the head of the whale, and this is very possibly true. However, I get the impression, after spending close to 40 years out on the water doing seabird surveys out of Moss Landing, where we frequently see this during the summer months, that it's just sheer exuberance. They're just having a good time. This is the pattern of a humpback whale, and you'll notice that there are two nostril openings here. Most of the great whales that we have in the bay do have the two nostrils, but if you see one with just one, what do we have then? What? No, not a blue. No, not a warble. No. Sperm whale. Sperm whale is a totally different subfamily within the whales. We don't get sperm whales in close to shore very frequently, but once in a while we do. And no, they don't try to ram the boat like we did. But you'll notice that this little the shape of the dorsal fin on the humpback whale is different than it was on the sei whale and the fin whale, where it was one single curve, whereas on the humpback whales, they've got this little bulge on the leading edge of the fin, which is fairly distinctive. This is what we call the flute pattern, and what we've been doing on this is identifying individual whales by the patterns of their flukes, the assemblage of the mollusks that are attached to the flukes themselves, and chunks that might have been bitten out of them, not by other whales, but usually by sharks. And of course, they are mammals, not fish. The tails go up and down. They don't go sideways, back and forth like they do on a fish. These guys here are important to us, the orca, or I don't care for the name killer whale. They're That's all whales kill things. It's just the orcas take chunks out of it as opposed to swallowing large quantities of small ones whole. That might focus up a little bit there. Just see if you can sharpen that up. This is a male. You can tell it's a male because it's got this very tall, straight leading edge on the dorsal fin, whereas in a female, there's a slight little break about 2/3 of the way up, and it bends backwards at that point. It's generally not as tall either. And a gee whiz facts, if you get one in close to shore, because there is a resident pack in Monterey Bay, if you get some of these in close, why the male, of course, is very conspicuous, but he's not the leader of the pack. Ladies like this. The female, the older adult female, and her previous youngsters, which may be very young males, leads the pack, and the male just hangs around there for a while, not necessarily always the same male. There seems to be a lot of transition back and forth from one to another. The whales that you're most likely to see coming in close to shore, of course, are gray whales. And their migration now is just about at its top. The gray whales breed down in lagoons off the western coast of Baja California, Ojo de Libre and Scammons, and there's one other one down there too, right near the boundary line of Baja California Norte and the state Baja California del Sur. They have their calves down there, and then they start coming back up the coast. And when they come back up the coast, because the calves are still lactating, and consequently dependent upon the presence of the female, in our area they come in very close to shore. We've actually had gray whales come into Monterey Harbor, but generally they don't do that. They may come in close to the breakwater, close to the shoreline. Why? Why did they do this? Because of orcas. The orcas hunt them by sending out audio signals that, like a radar, bounce off the body of the whale, and that signal is diffused if the female is in close to shore, because they can't get a clear fix on just where that whale and her calf is. However, if the orcas do manage to find the calf, the female sometimes will try to defend the calf by getting up underneath it and literally lifting it out of the water, so that the orcas can't reach it. But of course, she can only do that for a limited few seconds at a time. Then she has to submerge and go in and pick them up again. The orcas generally attack the calves, but they will go for the adults as well. And the part they want is the tongue. They go for the tongue. And of course, once they've done that, why, for all practical purposes, you have an adult gray whale that's dead, the calf is dead. They don't usually rend the rest of the carcass. They're just going for the tongue. This is the head or bonnet of a gray whale. There are two different kinds of invertebrates that attach themselves to the bonnet. One is called sea lice, and the other is a mollusk of the genus Cypris. And the whales will frequently play havoc with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regulation about having the boats stay at least 100 yards away from the whales, because the whales will come to the boats and rub their bonnets against the hull of the boats in attempting to dislodge these irritating critters. That's a technical biological term. Off the bonnet of the whale. And sometimes the incrustations grow so very dense that you can't really see much of the actual outer surface of the skin of the whale. It's just a solid mass of incrustation on the head of the whale. Here we've got two nostrils, so we know that we're in the group of the white whales. And here's another view of that fluke pattern again. We call this the fingerprint when you see this because several of the researchers, and notably Nancy Black out of Moss Landing, who got some bad publicity from the feds because supposedly she was baiting orcas in order to get good pictures of them. Actually, she was trying to get them to attack a gray whale and the calf in order to try to get more detail on just what it is that the technique is that the whales use to hunt. She identifies individual whales, both grays and orcas, by the patterns of the mollusk incrustations on their tail. Now that's what we call the fingerprint. The next slide shows the footprint. When the whale comes to the surface and it blows, it exudes the stale air in its lungs that also brings up a mucus residue that shows on the surface of the water like this, and as they continue to surface and blow, there's then a trail of footprints of where that whale is, and that's how some of these skippers on the whale watching boats are able to find out where the whale is going to come up again in about 4 minutes, because they just take a bead on the line of those footprints and then rush their boat up ahead, the equivalent of about 4 to 5 minutes of travel for the gray whale, and sometimes the gray whales will come up very, very close to the boat. That way the skippers can say that we haven't violated the federal rule because the whales came to us. We didn't go to the whale. This is the underside of a whale that again hasn't read the regulations and is coming right at the boat, floating on its back, where it can rub its belly against the bottom of the boat as it goes underneath. You can see how the pectoral fins are attached to the body, since we have that fairly lascivious portion of the sea otter thing early on. Well, I'll point out these are the genitals of the male back here. That gets the porn portion of our And now for the next one, please. This is just to see that you're awake. Now we're going to move into the smaller stuff. We have other members of the cetacean family out there as well. This is Pacific white-sided dolphin. They and the common dolphins also run in very fast-moving herds out there in the water. A herd is the preferred term, by the way, for a large group of these smaller animals. The dolphins will oftentimes run with the boat. The prime one is the Dow's porpoise, beautiful black and white porpoise that will get right in and use their incredible abilities to run at very high speed, get right in underneath the stern of the boat. And this is something that you might see from Point Lobos, because there's a pod of Dow's porpoises that runs with the boats in Carmel Bay. And what you'll see is a series of very quick black and white flashes as they come out of the water, and then they take the pressure wave from the prow of the boat, and they use that and they run along with that, and then they'll do a great big circle and come around much faster than the boat can run, even with the throttles wide open, and come in and do this again. And they'll usually run with the boats for about 4, 5, 6 minutes, and then say, okay, that's enough of that. We've given them a show, and we're going to go on our way. This is Rizzo's dolphin, or Grampus. Rizzo's dolphin occurs in very large herds in Carmel Bay in the wintertime. And you may see several hundred Rizzos together at one time. It's a very slow-moving dolphin with a relatively blunt head. The courtship apparently is very vigorous in these animals, because you'll notice that there are scar marks all over the head of this particular female Rizzo here, where the male has been raking her with the two big incisor teeth on the top during the time of their mating. Some of this may be between males that are fighting together as well. This is a very slow-moving dolphin. You can get your boat right in with the herd. The dolphins pay no attention to the boat whatsoever. And one of the interesting things about finding a herd of Rizzos is that at times you will see what look like little black fire plugs jumping out of the water very quickly and back into the water. No fin on the back at all. These are right whale dolphins. They're only about 3 feet long. They seem to travel regularly with Rizzos, and they're very fast and very excitable animals, as opposed to the Rizzos, who are very stolen and slow-moving, like Uncle Fred on the couch after Thanksgiving dinner. Just sort of mosey along. But Rizzos occur in these very, very large herds. This is 3 Rizzo adults with their calf right there. And they give birth annually once they reach about 8 years of age. Now, further on out, and not quite as likely to occur inshore, but you might get it in autumn and fall, is northern fur seal. Northern fur seals occur in relatively small numbers in the bay, but usually the autumn birding trips that go out will find one or more of the fur seals out on the open water. There's another one we have here, and this is Steller's sea lion. You know, we referred to Steller's earlier on here, one of George Steller, one of the early explorers up off the coast of Alaska doing work with sea otters. This animal is named in his honor. It's a huge sea lion, much bigger than the California sea lion. They breed in small numbers at Point Año Nuevo up in San Mateo County, and I've seen them going by the mouth of Carmel Bay, so you might see one in close to shore. Up at Año Nuevo Island, of course, the elephant seals are up there. And I don't know, have you gotten elephant seals hauled out or come ashore on
Wieners. Wieners.
Yeah, I would think that you would. I would think of the numbers of the animals that are there. When I was still with the Fish and Game Department, and in my first year here, Año Nuevo did not belong to state parks. That was part of the Fish and Game Reserve. And consequently, I inherited it as part of my duties as the unit biologist for the Peninsula counties. And 2 of the wardens agreed to take me out to Año Nuevo Island in order to look at what were then the residual ruins of the old Coast Guard station there. And they said, we can go out on low tide. You can put on a wetsuit and we'll just wade over to the island, because the water is only about 3 to 3.5 feet deep at that time, and we've got, on these low tides, we've got a good time on board of about 2 hours. So I went over to the island, and when we came back and got up on the shore taking off the wetsuit, of course there were large numbers of these big hunks of protein piled up along the beach there. And I said, it's hard to imagine anything could prey on those things. And the warden says, oh yes, great white sharks prey on those. And matter of fact, the largest known population of great white sharks on the California coast is right here around the I never talked to that guy again. They fight vigorously, back and forth with one another, with their bodies erected and pounding their heads back and forth together, and then nabbing one another with these great big teeth. And that's why all of the necks of the big bull elephant seals are just encrusted with scar tissue. It's just a solid wreath of scar tissue around it. Well, here's the guy. Great white shark is their major predator. Now, if you see this one, please give me a prompt call. We haven't had the walrus show up yet here, And with climate change, we may not get to see them at all. One that we've spent a lot of time on this morning is sea otters. The otters are delightful. They come in close to shore. Sometimes they haul out on shore. The interesting thing in my experience is that we were on a birding trip with Monterey Bay seabirds 2 weeks ago, well offshore. We were by a DME 12 miles offshore and found first a pair of otters and then a single otter floating way out there. And that was out over the submarine canyon where the water is several thousand feet deep. And I don't know, they obviously weren't going down into the water column in order to find food. So what they were doing out there, I have no idea at all. All right, let's move on to our two main, the harbor seals and the California sea lions. I'm not going to spend a long time on the harbor seals. You see these regularly pulled out here on the shore. One of the things that I'm oftentimes struck by is the tremendous variation in coloration of harbor seals. And the fact that what this can lend to is marvelous, marvelous camouflage. This guy is motionless unless you're really looking for him. Why, you might not even see that now. California sea lion. This is a male with this large bony mass on the forehead, which is called a boss, a B-O-S. And they breed on some of the Channel Islands. They breed in the Farallones. There's a few of them that breed at Año Nuevo. And I suspect that some may breed in places on the offshore rocks along the coast heading down toward Bixby Creek. And I've scanned that with scope on regular occasions during the spring to try to get a good look at see some, but I haven't found any yet. And I would appreciate any information from any of you that know where sea lions actually pull out and give birth on these areas to the south, down toward the lighthouse and down toward Bixby Creek. Let's take a look at the details of, you'll notice that the fins on these animals are located near the front of the body. This is actually a major part of their propulsion, the pectoral fins. Details of what those fins actually look like. They make wonderful, great pellets. This is the hind flippers. And on the California sea lions, these are the famous seals of the circus. They can take their hind feet and swing them around so that they can waddle back and forth, which a harbor seal cannot do. Harbor seals, the hind limbs are encased in the body, and they have to do this sort of humping along like a large worm to get from one place to another. But the sea lions can actually waddle. Here's details of the finger-like structures on those hind, one more. This is a pump hauled out at the Moss Landing, and this has always been a favorite of mine because the pump is adjacent to a boat with a rather ominous name for a harbor seal pump. And that will be the end of the slide part of the program. Now, what I want to do at this time, because Rick specifically asked me to cover this, is talk a little bit about this situation where there are various groups gathering up sea lion pups and rehabilitating these because of factors that suggest that the animals are suffering from malnutrition. This is no doubt correct. As I think all of you are probably aware by now, there's been some significant changes in water temperatures during the last decade, and especially the last 5 years. And what has happened is that with warmer water, and the inability of warm water to harbor as much oxygen as cold water can, most of the forage fish that the pinnipeds feed on have moved further offshore into deeper water. This not only makes it more challenging for the pinnipeds to find the fish, but it requires the females to have to go so far offshore that the time they can spend onshore nursing their pups is sharply restricted. And consequently, these pups are coming ashore malnourished, looking for additional food, and these people from the various rehab agencies and so on have been coming out and gathering up these sea lion pups and taking them everywhere from Sausalito to Santa Cruz and attempting to nourish these animals and get them back into shape. I'm going to take what is probably a very unpopular stance with some of you, but please bear in mind I'm a wildlife biologist. There's something called Liebig's principle, or the Liebig's law of the minimum. And what it states is that factor which is in the shortest supply in an animal's habitat is going to determine what its optimum numbers are, what the ceiling of those numbers are. And if something falls into lack of supply, in this case forage fish for adults, then what's happening is that the population, and not individuals, we're not talking about cuddly little pups in the arm, but the population of the sea lions is undergoing a adjustment to the carrying capacity of the environment. And this is something that's, I think, is important to try to get across to the public that you're working with. That while there's probably an excuse for empathy on the part of the rescuers to get these pups and bring them back and artificially nourish them in the rehab facilities, why you're not doing the population as a whole a favor. You're only doing a favor for the individual pup. And the number of pups that are coming ashore malnourished are much larger than the number that can be handled by these rescuing entities. So it's one of those things where as humans we have this empathy for the fate of the young pup, but it's counterproductive to the population as a whole. And as a biologist, my reaction is don't do it. But they will. They don't do it. Questions from the floor? Anybody? Yes, sir.
We've seen several. Let me get a mic.
Could you spell that, please?
Well, the whale comes out of the water?
No, Liebig's law.
Oh, Liebig. Liebig's law, Leibig ''S. And it's in there with various principles that get pounded into your head when you're going through your basic biology training. Glover's law and several others. Okay.
Bruce, we've seen several females come up at Sea Lion Point, and we watched them abort their fetuses.
Yes.
Over 80 of them that we've seen and been able to count when we've been out there scoping.
Right.
Can you explain, I think I know the answer, but can you explain what we were witnessing and why?
What you're witnessing is a female who intuitively, I don't want to put this into an intellectual context, but intuitively realizes that it will not be able to bring either the pup to full term in a healthy manner, or perhaps that lack of food is causing it to involuntarily abort that pup. But the main thing is, it's in a long-lived animal, like a California sea lion, there is a selective advantage. Just from an evolutionary standpoint, since you know, I've got to be careful, I'm getting anthropomorphic here. Since the animal senses that it can breed again in future years when perhaps conditions are closer to optimum to skip this generation. The sea lion isn't thinking like that. It's just, that's what's happening. Its physiology is triggering this reaction. Yes, and then oh yeah.
Bruce, so the forage fish that sea lions are used to eating are moving further offshore.
Correct.
Are there not other fish that the sea lions could switch to as a food source?
Not as the quantity that the sea lions could switch to. The things like the mackerel, the anchovies, the top smelt, and so on, sorry, these are fish that gather in large schools. And the sea lions have this hunting ability to surround, several sea lions, surround these fish, and they instinctively go into a tight ball. And then one of the sea lions can dart through the middle of the ball and get 6 or 7 or 8 fish all simultaneously at one time. Yes, sir? Either one. Okay, where?
Back here.
Oh,
Question on the harbor seals, since
Yeah.
we're beginning to see their births. Should we expect similar type scenarios with, or is their fish stock different enough?
no, because the harbor seals are not foraging in the water column. They're going down to the bottom and getting on flatfish like halibut and hake and all those small bottom-dwelling fish. That's why the harbor seals have got those great big long vibrissae hair, so they can go down in the water, and even with their big eyes, which helps them to see well down in very murky water below the photozone, why they're getting fish off the bottom. Harbor seal, the sea lions are foraging in the water column. Okay.
Hi. This seems sort of intuitively obvious that as the water gets warmer, the fish are going out farther. But I've been wondering, has anyone ever done any research on that, like random sampling, checking different areas to see how the density changes?
A lot of that's been done both by the Long Marine Lab over in Santa Cruz and then by Moss Landing, and even Embari is getting into that now too. Yes.
I understand there's a cyclic variation in the schooling fish that is independent necessarily of fishing. In the past, when that's occurred, has there been a study as to whether that's affected the sea lion population?
I'm not aware of any studies, but I'm not a marine biologist, so I'm going to back off from that one and say that's one where you have to hit some keys on your computer to find out. Okay.
So I guess following the same thread, is there any evidence that this may be partly cyclical, or is this a totally new phenomenon?
Well, the intensity of it seems to be greater than anything that we have witnessed in recent times when scientific knowledge has been gathered. But of course, if you go back into geological time, why, yes, there's probably been some significant cycles that are as deep or greater than this. Remember, we had an entire civilization in North America, the Anasazi, completely disappear from the American Southwest. Now we know because of a drought that lasted 60 years. So a climate cycle that would induce something like this, like, you brush your teeth with sand, that's all. Over here, she doesn't have a mic.
I can stand up.
No,
Use the mic as a mic. Oh, I'm sorry.
We have a lot of female sea lions up here now, we've never had before. Do
Yeah.
you think they're going to mate here? And
I don't think they're going to try to mate. I would think it's just the opposite, that right now, because they're hungry and because they're weakened, that may be the last thing on their mind. It's sort of like, not tonight, dear, I have a headache.
Robert, yours?
Yes.
Yeah, my questions actually are two, but I think they're related. One is, in a normal year, what would the mortality rate of juvenile sea lions be, and how many babies does a female sea lion give birth to in her lifetime?
Okay, in a normal year, meaning an average or a mean,
Yes.
it's probably on an order of 1 out of every 5 doesn't make it. As far as their reproductive longevity is concerned, sea lions probably live a little bit longer than harbor seals do, but I would manage that probably in a lifetime they might be able to get off 10 to 12 young from an annual perspective, and then they either die of old age or white sharks get them.